here's the thing. For everybody listening, don't make the same mistake the Bengals just did in any facet of your life.
People are going to get hurt. It's the hockey season.
What about the Jared Cook play on the sideline?
I was very tempted to just put defense.
I'm saying it right now. If Anthony Davis is out for the playoffs, they don't make it out of the first round.
Come on, Austin and I have been saying this ever since Joe Burrow got injured.
I don't really think the Dodgers are going to make the World Series this year. I feel like they'll make it to the NLCS.
The Fernando Tatis extension, because that really surprised me.
Like you said, Ovechkin, he's getting older. He hasn't been playing as well as I imagined. He's one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, but he hasn't started off this season as hot as I would hope.
Hi, I'm Jeff Allen, and you're listening to Outsiders Opinions with Kevin and Austin.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our NFL Opinions of the Week. This is a second video. This is, after Monday Night Football, no one talked about it enough. But for me, the guy I'm going to be setting lobs up to, and the man that's been against Josh Allen for a few years, Austin.
Yeah, this is something I've been harping on for a very long time, and I'm glad we finally get to talk about it. Josh Allen has the talent, but there's always been those mental errors that he continues to make. What are your thoughts on all of it?
Yeah, so I've been high on Josh Allen, and I've said, this year's a big year for him. And he didn't play well last year. So I think this year I was like, this is huge. And I've been dealing, the highs are just incredible. But man, the lows, if Monday Night Football is a sign of the lows of Josh Allen, I don't feel that the highs aren't enough for me. Because I texted you, it was one of the worst throws when he could have I clearly could have seen him getting the first down, especially because he puts his body on the line. And he just throws it into where there are two guys covering one guy. And it's just awful. And it just wasn't making sense. And he's the reason the Bills lost that game.
100%. Zach Wilson was not extraordinary in that game, and we touched on that more in our last Opinions of the Week video that came out on Thursday. But his performance was so poor compared to what last year he finished third in MVP voting. In 2020, he finished second in MVP voting. But I think people see the highlights. They see the big throws. Like you mentioned, the highs. The highs of Josh Allen are very high. I can give you that. But his lows trump all of that. Him having 15 or 14 picks last year with 13 fumbles. That is inexcusable.
Yeah, last year was not a good year for him. The year before that, the AFC divisional game that went into overtime, that was probably a peak Josh Allen. And in that year, he was amazing. Last year, he fell off. And I saw a stat, too, about the takeaways ever since I think it was since 2018. He's had the most takeaways. He had a rough first 2 years, in my opinion. So where that is, but last year, as you mentioned, that's bad. And I wonder if it wasn't Josh Allen that we saw, but it was Brian Daboll with Josh Allen. That's what made him great.
That's a valid question. But I wouldn't even say his first 2 years were all that difficult. His first season, that was tough. But his second season, he threw his least amount of picks for a season in his career with 9. That was the only season he's thrown below double digits. And it doesn't look like he's going to be below double digits this year with starting out with 3. And then you look at his second year, he was pretty bad with 14 fumbles. But last year, again, he had 13. So it's not like that was an outlier for him. It seems like it's kind of the regular for him to have. He's had 8 fumbles, 14 fumbles, 9 fumbles, 8 fumbles, 13 fumbles, and then 2 in this game. 1 of them was lost. So he's very inept at taking care of the ball.
Yeah, and that's something, especially, so when I talk about the first year, as you mentioned, second year, as you pointed out, based on that, it seems like he got better. But he was such a raw product out of Wyoming. I believe he had less than 60% accuracy while playing at Wyoming.
I can fact check that, but I know his first 2 years he was below 60%, and then his 2 years as a starter, his sophomore and junior year, he was below 60% at 56 and 56.3. But looking at his first 2 years, very low percentage, and then his third year, which honestly is probably his best year, the year he got second in MVP voting. He had 69% completion percentage, his most yards of his career, most touchdowns of his career, his best touchdown to interception to ratio, because he only had 10 picks this year. He had 9 picks the year before, but he only had 20 touchdowns passing wise. And then you go to his rushing, and this year he had 8 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for his second highest total. But ever since then, he's fallen off in almost every category, and it's concerning because yes, I would still say he's a top 10 QB, as I mentioned before, but he's a lot more comparable to a Kirk Cousins than he is a Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. And if the turnover things keep happening, it's probably going to be worse than Kirk Cousins for me. And the thing is, we've seen him at his highs, and it's the plays there. It's just his decision making. That's the big problem. I don't think there's a lack of talent. It's just make the right read. And something we saw Mahomes deal with, but not to this extent, was just take the small plays. And that's something I think we need to see in his maturing. Or he did do it a little bit. I just don't know what happened for him not to do that anymore. Because that's a big thing that separates the quarterbacks outside of talent, in my opinion.
I think a big thing that separates Mahomes and Allen is, even though Allen's definitely a better runner, Mahomes can still run, but the passing difference is just so much better, like yards wise, touchdowns wise. It's just Mahomes threw 6 more touchdowns on 2 less interceptions, but he also threw for the most yards in the league by a wide margin with 5,200. It's just Mahomes, well, he also had much less fumbles with only 5 last year. So if you go by fumbles plus interceptions, that's only 17, while with Josh Allen, it's 27. So Mahomes just takes care of the ball better, and he's a better passer. I know he can have bad games, but usually that's the fault of the receivers or the O-line, not really him.
Yeah, and I'm really thinking of that 2020 or before last year, if that makes sense, when he had that month of just throwing picks. And then I think we saw the evolution last year of Mahomes. So, and then what I think the big thing between that separates quarterbacks is, of course, you need the talent. You need that talent. Like you said, Mahomes is a better passer. But with Joe Burrow, too, once you get past that talent, it's when do you take risks and when do you don't? And that barometer, I think that's just not a thing in Allen's decision making. Like, oh, what's the risk and reward? And we saw that with Dak too. I think Dak was more risk, and now he's trying to dial it back. But he was aware of that dial. That dial is just non-existent for Allen. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think a lot of people like to say, oh, it's just a young, dumb QB. But at what point are they not the young, dumb QB? Rookies are given the advantage. Peyton Manning is a perfect example of this. Young, dumb NFL QB. Throws a ton of picks. Doesn't really know how to read NFL defenses yet. Doesn't know when to throw the ball, when not to take those risks that you were mentioning. But if you go look at the picks that Manning threw, it really did fall off after he was 26. And he started to be a lot more consistent. But if you look at Allen, it seems to go up, his percentages. They're not changing. Manning obviously got better at taking care of the ball. And in those eras, there's a lot more picks than there are now. And that's why we saw Josh Allen right up there with the most picks in the league last year.
Yeah, and what you were talking about is like, when do you not become the young dumb guy, and when do you start worrying about the picks? For me, it's when I have to start paying you big money, or I have to think about paying you big money. So with Trevor Lawrence, with Justin Fields right now, okay, am I going to pay all the big contract? What do I have here is my question. Do I have a top 5 guy? Do I have a top 10 or less than that? And with Allen, the problem is you already gave him that contract, and these, I don't know what to call them, these blemishes or these stains are starting to show up in his playing career. I'm looking at his contract now. He's looks like his base salary right now, it looks like he's still on that rookie contract.
Yeah, I think next year is when the contract.
Okay. And it looks like I'm looking at Spotrac and it says there's a potential out after 2025. But if you're the Bills, you gave him this contract and it's one of the best or one of the most expensive because you thought you had your guy. And that's the problem to me when you have a quarterback like this and you want him, you of course want your quarterback to be the best. But you have to make sure, right? Or you're like paying what the Giants are doing for Daniel Jones with Dak. Dak and Daniel Jones have the same contract. It's just the inflation. I'm going to call it the inflation of the quarterback. So is Josh Allen worth the money you're giving him? Right now, no.
That's true. And you look at it, I'm going to very comparable QB in my opinion, Jared Goff. Both were very highly picked, raw talent at the beginning of their career. But the one thing that they figured it out, or between them, is yes, 12 picks in 2018 for Jared Goff, 16 in 2019, 2020, 13, but in 2021, 8, 2022, 7. He's past that. He's 29. He's 2 years older than Allen. Allen's 27. But when Goff hit those years, first year in Detroit, second year in Detroit, he's kind of figured it out. And that's why we saw him make the Pro Bowl last year and throw for almost 30 touchdowns with only 7 picks, 29 touchdowns, 7 picks. And he was very, very good. He almost led them to the playoffs. And while he's not that player that's going to win you games, he's not the Mahomes. He's not the Jalen Hurts. He's not Burrow. As we saw in the Chiefs game, Goff never made a mistake. Now, there's throws he could have made, but he also made some very good throws. But he never made that key mistake. If Goff throws one pick in that game, they lose. He could not afford to make a mistake. Now, Mahomes can get away with it sometimes because of how talented he is, because he can win you games. Mahomes can throw a pick. But in Allen, he can throw a pick and be fine. It's the second pick. It's the third pick. It's the fumble, and then it's the other fumble that you lose. That is just, you had the talent to win your team games, but by your decision-making, you're actively taking away wins.
Yes, and I like the comparison with Goff and Allen. And I think you said Goff has the talent to win you games compared to Goff. Goff could prove us wrong. And that's I missed some of the game, but I like what you're saying with Goff. And that's what I think you have to do when you have a quarterback with high talent. It's when do you just take a back seat? When do you do what Goff did? Throw and do everything right. And Mahomes, too, can make a mistake, but they understand at which point of the game they take risks and which point of the game they, I want to say, game manage. You understand where you're at, and you follow accordingly. Allen, to me, I think, I almost want to say is like a little kid looking for the big play all the time. And you just can't do that right now. It's not Madden where you can throw a bunch of picks and figure it out on defense.
Yeah, because it just puts your defense in a bad spot. And every QB ever I'm going to compare to Brady in some sense. But people called Brady at some points in his career a game manager. But that's because he just didn't take those dumb shots that sometimes work out for Allen. Allen has the highlight play where it's a crazy 90-yard pass to Diggs in double coverage, and Diggs caught it and made an incredible catch. Okay, but those don't work every time. Those don't work even 10% of the time. So if you're going to continue to throw them, I would say 10% is a catch, 50% is an incompletion, 40% is a pick. So it's 4 times as likely to be a pick than a catch, but you're still throwing up that ball. that's a throw that Brady wouldn't make. He'd just dump it to the running back, and people would say that he's just a system quarterback. No, he's not making the game-changing mistake that you can't afford to make. And we've seen that with Mahomes just throwing in the Lions game. He made short throws to either his tight end when Kelsey was out or to running backs, because you have to be able to make those throws to not take a sack, and you can't just chuck it down the field for no reason. Mahomes made no mistakes in the game. I know he threw a pick, but that's because of his wide receivers. But that's why Mahomes is so good right now. Is Mahomes has gotten to the point where he is not taking those big risks, and I would say the majority of the picks are the receivers' faults, and the picks that aren't are not in dire times. It's Brady taking that chance on 3rd and 10 up 14. It's the play at the end of the half. Hey, 30 seconds left. We need a 40-yard play to get in field goal range. Let's try to make it. Where if they get the ball, they don't have any timeouts. If they get the ball, it's a pick. It's the end of the half. No, Allen throws the pick with the game on the line, basically. We saw that in the Vikings game last year in overtime, where the Vikings kick a field goal, Josh Allen go win us the game, throws a pick to Patrick Peterson in the end zone. Those are picks that lose you games. You can't throw that pick. At worst, kick a field goal and tie the game. But Josh Allen wants to make the game-winning play, and by doing that, he loses the game.
And to go back to that Vikings, there's an interception. There's also a fumble at the 1-yard line
that resulted in a Vikings touchdown.
Yeah,
it's the turnovers in the big games.
Yeah.
Kirk beat him in that game. You know why? Not because Kirk is more talented, but because Kirk didn't throw a pick. It's the not making the mistake more than it is how good are you at QB. It does not matter. I could be the best QB in the world, but if I'm throwing the ball into triple coverage every play, I'm bad. Because I can't make it. QB is so much more than just talent. It is so mental. It's the only sport in football besides maybe kicker or punter that you have to be smarter than you are talented. It's really the difference between, like I said, I could just say a very good QB and an all-time great one. Is just, can you make the right read in the right time? The wide receiver knows the routes. He can make a great route. Now, intelligence does help when you're when the QB is scrambling. Hey, how can I get here? Or if it's a choice route, choosing the right, either the slant or the go or whatever it is. But QB, those mistakes you make cost you games. When you're a wide receiver or anywhere else on offense, you make a mistake, you just get tackled, or you just don't get the ball thrown to you, or you drop a ball. The large majority of the time when you make a mistake as a QB, it costs you games.
Absolutely, I agree. And I'm thinking people may think we're too hard on Allen right now because the Jets have a great defense, but that stresses this point even more. You understand what the defense you're facing against. You have to be prepared. And to me, once Rodgers went down, the Bills should have blew the Jets out or have a nice lead, not an 8-point lead. You should have more with that offense. And that's just a huge thing. So I think with Allen, how does he respond from this? Does he cut down the turnovers? Because like you said with the stats before, we've seen him do this. This isn't a new thing. It's just something that's gone unchecked. And I don't know what you do from the offensive standpoint, try to take the ball out of his hands, but I don't really know what goes from here, but I think this is a terrible performance. And people should be going about like, man, how could Josh Allen do this? This is a fall because there's no injury. I know he may have had the UCL injury last year, but it was even happening then too, the stuff before then. So there's no injury here. It just seems like he's not focused on not making mistakes.
Yeah, I don't really know what else I could say. This is just, it's obviously a problem, and I'm sure he understands that. I'm sure the coaches are harping on it, but when it matters, when you're getting blitzed by a 300-pound lineman, are you going to make the right read? And that's what separates, again, the good from the great.
Yeah, and that's what we wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk about Josh Allen. I texted you a fun text, and so let us know what you think. Any final thoughts, Austin? I'll let you close it out.
No, thank you guys for listening. What do you guys think about Josh Allen? Are we too hard on him, or are you guys with us? But thank you for listening, and catch us in our next video.